In this video, I will showcase the workflow pipeline over a number of weeks for creating a game-ready character. So the first step of this project was to create the basic blockout of the bipedal character. And as we can see here, my teacher has provided a character sheet for the design. Essentially, the project was going to be to create the base blockout for this character using these character sheets and then taking it to ZBrush afterwards. In these early stages, all I needed to do was just get the base block out. So I started with a sphere for the head and a cube for the chest. I essentially needed to extrude the extremities, so the arms and legs, and then mirror it on both sides, so that I only need to do like the left side and then just mirror it over to the right side. So yeah, starting with the chest, I've then extruded out the forearms and the shoulders and then into the hands, and just done like a base shape of each extremity. For making the arm and the shoulders, essentially what I've done is I've been cutting in edge loops with the multi-cut tool and then extruding from those points. I've essentially done that for the thumb, cut in an edge loop and then extrude upwards, and the same for the fingers, cut in edge loops and then extruding outwards. The same for the foot. This was just going to be a basic shape of the foot. There was no animation needed for the toes or anything, so I didn't need that much detail, so I've just done a few blocks and then looked at it in smooth. So after I'd done some extruding, I'd ended up with the full arm and the full leg. I was making sure to check them in smooth as I was going to make sure that they were fitting okay to the character reference. I've then gone to shape the head a little better and then make sure to connect it at the neck. So now I have the full arm, the full leg, the chest and the head. I've then also gone in with the crease tool and created a few creases along the harder edges, such as the collarbone, the knees, the feet and the hands. And as we can see in smooth here, it fits nicely and looks quite good against the character sheet. All that was left now was to do a mirror, so I've mirrored my character so that it's equal on both sides, and as we can see in the front profile it fits quite nicely. I did have to move the feet so they're both facing forward, as on the character sheet this right leg was slightly turned. The arms were slightly higher than they should have been as well, but from the side profile as well it does fit nicely. There are some things I would change at this stage. If I had a better understanding of characters in general, I would have put the arms in a better T-pose position, as I think the fact that I didn't have them rotated so the palms are facing flat, it caused problems later on. So going back, I would definitely put the arms in a T-pose position with the palms facing downwards. I would have also made these elbows slightly thinner, as the thickness was causing issues with the rigging of the elbow later on. The final stage for Maya was to subdivide the model and get it ready for ZBrush. So as we can see, this is quite high poly. It needs to go into ZBrush. We're going to retop it later, so the poly count doesn't matter too much now. But yeah, this is the final turnaround of my subdivided alien character. So now that I was ready to go into ZBrush, I then needed to collect some reference imaging on muscle groups. I'd never worked on an alien character before of any form, so I basically needed to go and look at some anatomy for humans and human bodies, just so I could understand different muscle groups. So here we can see that I've got each individual muscle group laid out so that I can get a good understanding of what each thing goes where. Such detail as the arms for male and females as well. And then on the right here I've got some general alien characters. I wanted to go for like a Roswell alien, so quite a big head, big eyes, grey skin, so I needed to factor that into my reference imagery. Down here I had some eyes and faces. This was just so I could get some detail around the eyes, see what kind of where the wrinkles need to go, where it needs to be smooth on young and old characters, and then some hand detail, some bone anatomy just to see where the bones need to go, and then what kind of like lines and indents need to be within the hands. Now that my model is in ZBrush, I then subdivided it again so that the geometry was much denser. So we can see here that the poly count is rather high. We're in the millions of polys here. I did record all of my work in ZBrush, but I think all the video files have got corrupted, so I'm not going to be able to show that. So I will show turnarounds of the various stages of the production. So I'd never used ZBrush before, so this was a bit of a nightmare software for me. The controls were pretty difficult to get my head around, but I did get there in the end. I did have a bit of a massive oversight whilst I was modelling this character. I didn't block out my character muscle groups anywhere near as detailed as I should have done. If I was to go back and do this again, I would definitely go and block out every single piece of the muscle group. Essentially what I was doing to start with was drawing on some of the detail and then trying to block out in higher detail than I needed. So yeah, going back, I would definitely block out in more detail. So this is where I was at after the first few sessions of sculpting in ZBrush. As we can see, I'm using masks to section off different sections of the muscle groups, and then using the standard brush and clay tubes to build up some of the details. If I just clear the mask quickly, so we can see that I've got some definition. Like I said in the previous video, I would have definitely blocked this out a lot higher, but I think the end result is still quite good. So yeah, the aim was to block out and draw some detail on as much as I could, and then smooth it later. As I'm starting to get more confident with ZBrush, I've started to create more detail within the hands, arms, and start of the kind of the groin area, as well as the shoulders and back and neck. I've started messing around with the move tool, trying to basically fill out the object a bit more. So the biceps, triceps, and shoulders, I was using the move tool to shape them a bit better. I was then masking off the areas and then smoothing as I was going. After a few more sessions, I was trying to get a bit more detail within the chest area and the abs area. I was also doing the hands a lot more detailed, so I'm starting to get like the creases and the folds of the fingers and the palms. And as we can see on the back of the hands, I've started to essentially put some of the detailing of the knuckles and the striations and different bone areas, as well as some of the fingernails. I've used the move tool and the standard tubes build up for these detailings. So the back was looking a lot better as well. I've started to create a bit more detail within the lats and these big thicker muscles within the back, as well as the neck is starting to get a bit more shape now. At this point now, my character was really starting to take some shape. I've started to get a lot more detail within the legs. I properly blocked out these, so I did big strokes of clay tubes within the legs in these sections for my reference imaging. Made sure that I was trying to get the different quads and the hamstrings and all the different kind of connecting muscles all blocked out. And we can see the difference between the block out of the legs and then the rest of the body. It's just a lot more kind of formed and just looks generally a lot better. So yeah, that is definitely something I'll work on for next time. So did a bit more to the intercostal rib muscles, as well as the feet. I started to kind of map out where the toes were going to be, ready for next time. So a few more sessions on, I've done a lot more work to the feet, and I've started working on the head area. So starting with the feet, I mapped out the toes in the last little video. I've also mapped out the long bones connecting to the ankles for each of the toes. So I use masks and clay tubes to basically build this up, and then I use the move tool to shape the feet a little better. So the bottoms of the feet, you can see are slightly shaped inwards. Like I said, the toes don't need to be animated, so they're all connected at the moment. So moving on to the head area. So yeah, like I said, I was confident to start working on the head. So I've mapped out some eye sockets and then basically use masks to and subdivide to push in the eye sockets a little bit. I've then mapped out a jawline using mask as well, and then done some work to the neck. I've then used move tool on the head to shape it more to the reference, so it wasn't so spherical. And then done some general detailing with clay tubes for a nose and some of the eyebrow lines. So once I had the basic shape of the head, I then needed to put some eyes in my model. So I've made some spheres separately as an individual subtool, and then I've basically placed them within the model and used the move tool to pull out the eye sockets and the eyelids, so to make sure that they all fit nicely. So I'm pretty proud of the eyes. I think the eyes look really nice. They've got some good kind of lines in them and details in them. As well as them being separate objects so they can move individually. I've also done some lips, some little nose holes, and just some more general detailing on the face and neck. I've now got like a trachea going up the neck and some muscles within the neck, as well as these little like gaunt lines within the cheeks. In the last few sessions of the ZBrush sculpt, I'd basically spent this time trying to get a bit more detail out of my character, and making small adjustments here and there. For example, I moved the chest up more towards the collarbones and the shoulders because there was quite a big gap between the shoulder and the chest. This was just done with the move tool and masking. I also changed the shapes of the lips slightly. I made them slightly thinner, as well as adding a few more general details to the face and the model in general. So this is a turnaround of the model. I'm quite happy with the result. Considering that I didn't really block out as well as I should have done, I'm quite happy with how much detail I've managed to get. But yeah, going back, I would definitely block out more. So now that I was happy with the sculpt in ZBrush so far, I then needed to start sorting my muscle groups into poly groups. This was done by first using the Z Remesher tool to reduce the poly count and basically clean up the polys within the model. I then used the lasso tool to grab the feet, the legs, the chest, hands, and arms, and sorted them into their own poly groups with auto poly. I then basically needed to put them to UV unmap them. This was done within the Morph UVs section of ZBrush. So as we can see here, each of these are in their own individual poly groups and UV unwrapped. And the way I managed to unwrap all of these different objects was I go into Z plugin, select the poly I want to unwrap, and then just click unwrap, and it should unwrap all of them at the same time in their own individual islands. So now that my UVs were done in ZBrush, this was so that I could poly paint later. I then looked at some subdermal colour schemes for my character. I looked at general human subdermals, so we can see some of the warmer and colder colours within the face and the necks and things. This was so that we could get a lot more detail from our character. I then also went back to my reference imagery for my alien, so I wanted to use kind of colder colours such as greys, greens and yellows for my subdermal colours. I wanted the exterior skin skin to be like a light grey or a light green. So the subdermal colours, I wanted them to be colder so that it would fit that theme. Once again, for some reason, the video recording in ZBrush didn't seem to want to work. So this is the subdermal colour that I've chosen for my character. I've gone for darker greens along the major muscle groups, such as the chest, legs, and some detailing around the backs and the triceps, and then like a lighter green for kind of like fleshy areas such as like the abs and the calves. As well as like a quite a thick black for some of the bones. I didn't really want the bones to be showing up as yellow, so I wanted them to be like a darker colour within the subdermal colour scheme. But not so bad, I don't think. I would have done a lot more variation within the colours, I think, for next time. I would have splashed in some lighter colours, as well as a few more, variation within the colour scheme around the whole model. I then chose a light grey / green base coat for my model. I basically used the fill object tool to cover the subdermal colour with this colour. So like I say, I would have done a bit more variation within the colours because I mean not that much is peeking through. There is some that's poking through, like it looks quite good around the eyes and the chest area, I think. But generally I think it should have had a few more variations within the colour because it's not really showing that much. But I think the result is still quite good. So I knew this was just more of a pre-coat ready for Substance. I think a lot of the colour and the detail would have been brought up in Substance Painter. So I think that kind of saved me a little bit, was the Substance bit. If it was just this, I wouldn't be totally happy with the result on the model so far. So now it was time to take my high poly mesh from ZBrush and retopologize it in Maya. We do this so that we can basically reduce the poly count and make a low poly version of that model. And we would then take that high poly model and bake the normals onto the low poly version so that we basically have a high poly detailed version but with low poly mesh. So with all that cleared up, this was my first version of my retop in Maya. So I did two retop versions. This was the first attempt. The second attempt was a lot better. But if I just show you why I did a second attempt for retop. Essentially, I started off at the head and just used symmetry. I didn't actually mirror this time. I just did symmetry. It started to quad draw along the eyes and the mouth and kind of then build up the head, as well as I mapped out the tips of the fingers and then worked in up to the wrist, and then the same for the arms. I started with both ends of the arms and then basically filled in the gaps. So the problem I have with this retop is that to start with, it's way too high detail. There's no need for it to be this high detail, and I realised this at the end of the retop that there's no need for it to be this detailed. I also have a lot of weird spots. For example, the inside of the leg. I mean, I've got some 5-pointed stars as well as just like bad topology all throughout the legs here. On both sides, as well as these spots are kind of all throughout the model, along the chest, around the backs of the triceps. So yeah, generally I was not satisfied with this retop, so I started again, and I will show that now. So this is the early stages of my second attempt at retopology. I wanted to make sure that this version was much cleaner than the last one, so I've used bigger squares than I did in the last one, and I've tried to keep the spots of weirdness down to a minimum. I was also trying to avoid triangles wherever I could. Obviously some triangles are going to be used because you kind of have to in some spots. So unfortunately I don't have a version of this project to show the full retop quad draw section, so I'll show you the early stages, which is this, and then I'll show the finished smooth version. Okay, so this is my finished second attempt at the retop. So we can see straight away that there's no weirdness kind of going on around the legs or the back or the chest like there was on the past one. There is a 5-pointed star here, but I kind of had to use that. So this, I didn't draw all of these individually. This is a 2-division smooth version of my retop. So the reason I chose to go for 2 divisions of smooth was so that I could keep all of the detail from the a lot bigger squares that I used. So because I used bigger squares, I opted to go for the 2 divisions of smooth. So this has ended up as 35k faces, I believe. So it is slightly higher, but the reason I did choose this was so that I could get a lot cleaner UV seams. So before, when I was clicking for UV seams, they were going all over the place and they were really jagged. So with this new retopped version, I can get clear seams going all the way around the legs, all the way around the arms, and from the shoulder all the way around the hands to the armpit. So it's just a lot cleaner and smoother all the way through. So once that retop was finished, I've then gone to conform, which is just in mesh and conform. Basically what that does is that snaps all of these quads and these vertices onto the high poly version so that it retains a lot of the detail. Obviously, all the detail is going to be coming later in the high poly bake, but for now, it just keeps some of the detail within the geometry. So this is the final version of the retop low poly version, and that is now 35K, so that it can be used cleanly with UV seams. So at this point, I now started to cut in my UV seams. That was with the UV cut and sew. This was so that I could basically get the Substance Painter UVs ready for texturing. So as we can see here, I've got really nice, clean, straight UVs. I don't have kind of jagged edges going through, and I think they're hidden quite well. The hands, for example, so basically this was just one click, goes straight above the thumb, all the way through all the fingers, and down to the wrist. I've cut it off just below the pinky here so that it can open like a book. And the same for the legs. Again, really nice, clean UVs all the way through. These seams won't be all jagged and everything. They'll be nice, straight, clean UV seams. So once I've finished those seams, I've then gone and unwrapped all of these various objects. So I've got my hands here, my face, my torso. So they all fit nicely. I've made sure to make the head and the chest slightly bigger than everything else because I figured that these are going to have the most detail on, especially the face. The face is much bigger, so I wanted a higher resolution on the face. And this is just showcasing my checkerboard for the UVs. So nice, consistent all the way through, quite big, nice high resolution for everything. I wanted to keep everything as close to the same resolution as each other. Aside from the head and the chest, these are slightly bigger. I wanted them to be more detailed, so the resolution was slightly better. But as for everything else, nice, consistent and clean, all facing the same way for all of my checker. So at this point, my character is ready to be rigged. So what I've done is I've gone into the rigging section of Maya, and I've gone into a quick rig. I've then assigned basically bones to the wrists, elbows, shoulders, some in the spine, the knees and the feet, as well as a few in the neck. This also was paired with the weight painting. I've never done weight painting or rigging before, so the weight painting section was by far the hardest part of this project. It was quite difficult to understand where various pieces needed to be painted, and unless you have quite a good understanding of anatomy or you do lots of trial and error, it's going to be quite difficult to understand where you need to paint. So with that being said, I've gone into the weight painting and I've tried to adjust the painting values of where I want various parts to work. So the white sections indicate control. So if there's white section on the hips, for example, that means that the hips are going to be able to move, and it's going to influence all of the bits that are in white. And the black means that there's no influence on those joints. So I've adjusted the various levels of each of these different sections, making sure that I was painting in the correct areas. So for example, on the spine sections, some of the parts were affecting the top of the head, and I didn't want that, so I needed to basically paint them as black so that when the spine moves, the head wouldn't deform. This was the same for the shoulders, and the same for the arms as well. So when the arms were moving, it was affecting parts of the head and parts of the back, which isn't good. I didn't want that. So basically I made it just so that it was control painted within the sections that were supposed to be moving. So I've gone through and painted all of these different sections, making sure that they were influencing the right places. So paired with the weight painting, I was essentially using trial and error to make sure that everything was moving as it should do. I was testing the arms to make sure that things weren't deforming like this. So for example, the inside of the armpit there was deforming quite a lot, and the back here was also deforming, so I had to basically paint that out to make sure that it wouldn't deform. And this was the same for every little part of here. I made the trial and error for all of the different sections of the skeleton. So now the character was ready to be put in substance for proper texturing. Basically what I did with this was I made a subdermal layer and an epidermal layer, subdermal being the underlayer and epidermal being the overlayer for the skin. I've also kept my overlay as well, so if I toggle this on and off, we can see that the overlay is giving it some darker detail. As well as for the sublayer, I've done a few more details underneath, brought out some more of those colours from underneath. The overlay was a little bit darker still. I'm kind of lost some of the subdermal detail, but I think the end result is quite good. For the overlay for the skin, I wanted to make sure I had quite a lot of detail in there, so I put some pitting in there and some dots. These would indicate little spots and kind of like moles and things like that. I've also gone for a paint layer of elephant skin with a tiny height value, just to give the skin a bit of detail on it, a bit of pitting and mottling. But yeah, I'm really happy with this substance texture. It's kind of what I envisioned, and I think it looks quite good for an alien character. So at this point I could now put my model into Mixamo. Unfortunately I had some problems at this point. Basically when I was setting up the rig in Mixamo, it was cancelling out the elbows and the wrists points for rigging. I'm not too sure why. I tried various different models, but whatever I did I couldn't get the elbows and the wrists to rig properly. And I also think it was because the model is not in a proper T-pose position. I think that's why it can't really find the proper points for the rig. I was having issues with the eyes as well. For some reason, they wouldn't come through to the Mixamo FBX. Basically, what I did was I set the pivot point to the neck joint, so they were moving with the head, and then I basically exported it to Mixamo. But for some reason, it just wouldn't bring the eyes in, and I couldn't, for the life of me, get them to come in after that. So that paired with the arms and the eyes, it just kind of destroys the model a little bit, which is a real shame because I think the model was looking quite good, and this is where it does fall down. But all of those issues aside, I did get the FBX fully animated. This was the idle animation I used. I went for the unarmed idle and I changed the arm spacing slightly just so they weren't clipping through the legs. I then exported this, making sure that when I exported I picked with skin because this would help us later in Unreal. I then picked my walking animation, made sure to tick in place, downloaded without skin because we didn't need it because the previous standing idle had the skin. And finally, all I needed was my running animation for the sprint. So again, I did in place so that it wouldn't be running all over the place. It would just be like an in-place animation. Downloaded again without skin because we didn't need it again because the mesh had it on the original. So now it was time to put all my animations into Unreal. So first I made two folders, one for animation, one for mesh. I started by putting the unarmed idle in the mesh section because this then had the skeleton that we needed for the unarmed, and I put the walking, the standing and the running animations in their own separate folders. I've then gone and added all of the various textures I need for my character, getting it ready for the animations. The first thing I needed to do in Unreal for setting up animations was to create a blend space. So at the start of the blend space I have the idle animation going through the whole control. It goes to the walking animation all the way to the end, which is the sprinting animation, and we can see a smooth transition here. I then created the third person animation blueprint, and that is what is on screen here. This is so that we can connect it to the character so that the character has all of the animations that we want. This was also paired with a move state so that we could get the blueprint to work properly. I then needed to connect the blueprints to the third person character, so that's what I've done here. And in the event graph I have set up a sprinting function so that the character can sprint. I have also created some button inputs for the sprinting, so we can see here that left shift and right shift are both used for sprinting. And finally, here are the materials that I used for my character skin. I've got my normal, my AO and my regular base colour all plugged in, and I've also done a roughness multiplier in here just so I can turn the roughness up to make it less shiny. And to finish off with, here is my character all animated and running within the software. So I have the sprint function, which I'm using with shift, and then if I let go of shift, it goes to the walking animation, and I go back to sprinting again. And to finish off with, this is my subsurface character material. Obviously it needs a bit more work, but it's just to show that it's a kind of a see-through opacity material. The player movement all still works the same, it's just a slightly different material on the subsurface. So now I've decided to put my model into Sketchfab. This was so that I can have a 3D turnaround with the textures on it. So yeah, I'm also going to talk about kind of the things that went well and the things that didn't go so well in my project. The things that went well, I think I'm getting quite good at Maya now. Also ZBrush turned out to be fairly okay. Like at the start it was quite difficult to kind of get my head around the different tools and the different movement angles and everything. But once that was all finished and sorted, I really got into the ZBrush aspect of it. The things that didn't go so well, the rigging within Maya and Mixamo, this was a bit of a struggle. The weight painting is something that definitely needs some work. You know, I tried quite a lot of different things in order to get it right, and I felt like I was kind of fighting Mixamo and the rigging in Maya to get it to work properly. So that would be something I would revisit later on and do a better job of. Also the retopology, my first attempt at retop was pretty poor, so the fact that I went back and did another higher quality version of the retop definitely helped me in the later stages of the project. But yeah, all in all I think it's gone quite well. I'm quite happy with the results so far, other than those things that I would change and redo another time. But yeah, thank you for watching and following me through my project.